Hi everybody, welcome to my quadratic quagmire. What you're looking at here are a series of quadratic equations. So they're a pretty simple algebraic calculation, and what they involve is this. For instance, what we need to know is what is y equal to. In other words, if we substitute 1 for x in these two spots right here, in essence, 3 times 1 squared, or negative 12 times 1 squared, and then plus 9.5, what does that end up giving us as far as y? Okay? Now, it's a pretty easy thing to kind of play around with and figure out, but sometimes if it gets a little bit larger, numbers and so forth, it might not be so easy. So what we can actually do is convert this formula here into a Excel formula. In other words, something that Excel wouldn't understand, we make it understandable using the formula. So what we'll do here for the first one is we'll type in equal, we'll type in 3 times, and then we've got B3 here, which is going to be what's representing x, all right, to the power of, which is using the hat, of 2. And then we'll say minus, and we say 12 times, and again, B3, but we can't get to it, so we're just going to type in B3, and then plus 9.5. Now, we do that, enter it in, we get 0.5. So it's telling us that y is equal to 0.5. So 0.5 is equal to this calculation where x is equal to 1. All right, so pretty straightforward. Now, we'll do it one more time. So on this one here, we convert this equation into something Excel can understand. So over here, we'll type in equal, and then we'll put in there the number 3 times, and this time it's going to be B4, so we'll click on the B4, to the power of 2, and again minus 12 times B4, we'll have to type that in, plus 9.5. Now you put all that in there, hit the enter key. So now it turns out that y is equal to negative 2.5. So negative 2.5 equals, or better yet, this calculation here where x is substituted with 2, all right? And you figure that out, it'll equal 2.5. That's what that's saying. Now this third one, a little bit different. Here we want y, or we want what the calculation comes out to being, to equal 24.5. Therefore, what does x have to be? All right. Now we'll start this out by putting the formula in, like we did for the other two. So we'll say something like equal, and then 3 times, and in this case it's going to be B5. Nothing there yet, but you'll see it in a little bit. So B5, all right, to the power, so our little hat, of 2, right, minus 12 times, again, B5, all right, plus 9.5, right? I enter that in, you get whatever, okay? So now, we're going to use, now at this point, if you didn't know about this next tool I'm about to show you, you'd end up going into here and plugging one number in after another until this ended up being 24.5. So you could maybe try, let's say 1, nothing. Type in 2, nothing. All right, or not anything we need. I might go with negative 1, something like that. See? And look at that. I did it. I came up to 24.5, but I don't want to have to do that. You know, that was a pretty lucky one there. But we don't want to do it like that. So here's what we do instead. All right. We go into the Data tab. We click on to What If Analysis. We click on to Goal Seek, all right, and we tell it that we want to set this cell, all right, to the value or to equal 24.5. And we want the computer to then get to that by going in there and changing the number that would go into here. So it would start, you know, entering, re-entering until it got this to 24.5, right? So we just go ahead and hit OK, and boom, there it goes. It's got to be a -1. Not bad. Now, in our next example, we're going to click on to the third tab here, and we have what is called a matrix situation here. You probably remember these back in grade school, high school, college, whatever, where you'd have to solve at minimal, usually, it was for X, Y, and Z. So where if you put the whatever constant number that would equal X, and the same thing for Y and for Z, it would end up also calculating out to exactly what these numbers here are. So what does X, what does Y, what does Z have to be to equal 46 for the first one, and using the same number X and Y for this row to get 12, and the same X, the same Y, and the same Z number to get 50. Now, I remember that was just a horrific thing that you had to put together on paper to try to make happen. So instead, what we do is we have a calculation, and it's actually two different function formulas that we nest together and then enter in as an array, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a little bit. What I've done here is I've set up three different scenarios. Whenever you're trying to do a matrix, in this case, or solve a matrix, it always has to be perfectly square. In other words, if you've got, let's say, three numbers going this way, like X, Y, Z, then you got to have three rows. Or if you've got four, where you got W, X, Y, Z, then you have to have four going this way. And the same thing with 5 and 5. Okay, so your matrix can be any size imaginable as long as they were perfectly square, as I just described. All right, so the first thing you want to do is, in my opinion at least, is to kind of set up the matrix over here just the way that you kind of see it. You know, like just type it in so that you can kind of reference this. Over here, what you want to do is just plug in the numbers. In other words, the 5x would be just a 5, the 1y would be a 1, and the 8z would just be a z, and then you'd have over here the total, which would be 46. All right? And then you'd have over here a 4, a -2, as you can see there, and then a 0, because we have no z at all. Okay? If you don't do that, it won't work. And then the same with the rest of it. So here's what we'll do. We'll type in, I'll just work it going down. So I'll type in, let's say, a 5, a 4, and a 6. All right? And then we'll go over here and we'll say, okay, a 1, a -2, all right? And then a 7, all right? And then over here, we're going to have an 8. We'll have a 0, because there's nothing for Z, and then a 4. All right, that's it. And then for the last one, we'll do 46, 12, and 50. There we go. All right, so now we're going to solve for X, Y, and Z using this fantastic function formula duo. All right. So first of all, because this is going to be an array type calculation, what we need to do is select the area where we want to create the formulas at. In other words, instead of just putting in one cell formula or a formula in one cell and copying it down, we're doing 3. Now the reason why we're doing 3 is because we need an X, we need a Y, and a Z. So that's what we're doing here. All right? So I need to figure out what X, Y, and Z is. So I select that ahead of time. I don't just do the one, do the formula, and copy it down. No. You select the whole thing. All right? Now, we're going to type in equal. All right? I'm going to type in MM, and I got MMULT. Double-click that. All right? Then I'm going to type in MIN, and that's going to be giving me my MINVERSE. I'm going to double-click that. All right? Now, I'm going to select the range that I had done here. All right? It doesn't matter how you do it, but you can do it however way you need to get the whole thing selected. So we're just going to kind of select from here to here and then down to here. We're not doing the totals, just the numbers, right, for X, Y, and Z. All right? So we select that. We close that up, put a comma in there, and then we select the totals. Now I can't get to the total at the top, so I'm going to start from the bottom and just drag up. And go those 3 like that. Now once I get that, I'll close off my parenthesis, and I'm almost done here. So now I need to enter the formula. All right? Now the way you do this, because it's an array, we're going to hold down the Shift key, the Control key, and then hit the Enter key. And there we go. I showed you in another video how you could make this happen. All right? So at this point, as far as the formatting goes, with the equal X, Y, and Z, but just know that if you're doing this on your own and you don't do that extra numeric formatting, you'll still get 4, 2, and 3, and you're just going to have to assume that the 4 is the X, the 2 is the Y, and the 3 is the Z. That's all. No big deal. So that's your first one. Okay, now let's try the second one here. This one's going to be 6614. And then we'll go over here and we'll do 6316. And then we'll do 3196. And then 9199. And then, of course, our totals. So 99, 47, 94, and 50. And you can see I've got the formatting in there too. Now, so this is kind of interesting because, imagine if you had to do this by hand, and you didn't even know what you were doing, what kind of a nightmare it would be to try to figure out what W and X and Y and Z are supposed to be, but not only to where it gives you the 99 at this level, but where it gives you 47, 97, and 50 at these other levels. It's crazy. To have a calculation like this is just unbelievable. And this is something that we kind of use in a scenario of like manufacturing and things like that. It's a high-end production type calculation, I'll just say that much. And any of you that are in a situation where you need to figure this kind of stuff out, to have a tool like this is just unbelievable. Now, we're going to put the formula in for this one. So we're going to go over to here, all right? We're going to type in our equal. We're going to type in our MM. We'll double-click the MMULT, and we have to do the MIN, and that's going to give us our MINVERSE. All right? And then our range will be just the numbers. Close it, put a comma, and then select our range of totals, and then we'll close that up. And that's it. That's all I had to do. Control, Shift, Enter. Oh, of course, what did I do? I didn't select it all, okay? So if you did a stupid thing like I just did here, how would you get back? Because what happened was I didn't select that whole range. I just went to that cell, all right? So this is good. This is a good mistake here. So what you would do is you would select the range, just as you would have ahead of time, all right? You select the range. Hit your F2 key, which is the edit key, and that pretty much takes you back into where you were before you hit the Control Shift Enter. So there we are. Everything's already in place. So now we'll do a Control Shift Enter, and now they'll all go into place like that. So pretty neat. All right, let's do the last one here. All right, so we have like a 5 by 5 matrix here. So this is going to be a 4, 8, 6, 3, 5. And then we'll have a 2, 6, 8, 2, 3. Let's check my work there. Yep, okay. The third one there is going to be 1, 1, 8, 6, 3. Next one's going to be a 4, 7, 7, 3, 6. And our last number is going to be, or set of numbers are going to be 2, 4, 6, 2, 4. All right. And of course, we have to put the totals in there. So 89, 47, 94, 50, and 47. There we go. All right. So now we get to do the calculation again. So this time we will remember to select the whole range, right? So we do the whole range that we want the formula to be in. We type in equal. We type in M. There's our MULT, right? MMULT. And then we're going to type in MIN, MINVERSE. There we go. So we're going to select our numbers for the first part, close it, comma, select this range here, close it, and then Control, Shift, Enter, and voila. So pretty wild, everybody. I think some of the more advanced scientific calculators can figure this stuff out, but this is that last one there. That was a big one. That would take a lot of even if you knew what you're doing, it's a little bit of work to make that happen. So to be able to plug it all in here into a worksheet and apply these two great little functions, you know, nest them together and put them in as an array. What a great deal here. So hopefully this will help you later on, maybe with some of your worksheets. Might save you a lot of time, of course. So appreciate you watching the video, and thanks a lot. Take care.